with me, Justin House, on the 13th of April. Let's just get this one going as well. Let's try this. Okay. All right, good evening. Welcome to 474, episode 474 of TrueHouse with me, Justin House. Time has just gone 8:23. It is Wednesday, the 13th. Okay, hope you're all well. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the passing of Cedric Macmillan. The sadness with this is, I know it's a bit of a, hello, good evening, sir. The sadness is, I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, oh, it's another one died. And Dave Palumbo on RX Muscle, going back to the heavy muscle radio days with Chris Aceto, John Romano, and Dave Palumbo. If we're going to talk bodybuilding a little bit tonight, it's just, casualties of war. I mean, I've buried 6 friends myself. There's acceptable losses in bodybuilding, and obviously I've been long since retired. I mean, I retired on the 1st of April 2007. My bodybuilding career came to a very abrupt end one evening. What I'm seeing now is an alarming number of young men who have not reached 50. Good evening, how are you? Nice to see you, sir. And the sad aspect of this is, I mean, I turned 50 in January, and there were various Deadpools running on me back in the day. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Deadpool term, certainly in physical culture, specifically sort of bodybuilding, that's the obvious public stance, is that people do default to presuming it's steroids. Although people don't mention, these days that trans people are taking steroids, and specifically very cancerous excessive estrogen use. It's a bit of a shame, well, I think it's a massive shame that the public perception is steroids. I mean, obviously there are thousands of steroids, and there's no distinction made between corticosteroids and the list of androgenic anabolic steroids, and it's a great shame that the smeardia have done such a wonderful hit job on something I devoted 27 years of my life to doing. I mean, I was obviously very involved in bodybuilding from 1990 through till 2017 when I stopped. And although I retired from competitive bodybuilding in 2007, I still kept teaching for a further decade. So what we're seeing now, the popular theory, of course, is the vaccine, because they're all seem to be myocardic infarctions. Now, I've had 2 myocardic infarctions, which is posh language for heart attacks, and I've got a couple of stents put in. My 2 heart attacks came within 24 hours of each other in 2018, just around the time I watched Mum die, and I was in the Apple store, actually, funnily enough, updating, just swapping out one handset for another. And I remember feeling, you hear about heart attacks, and of the 6 I've buried, 2 were heart attacks. I started to think then, 2 were heart attacks and 4 were overdoses, recreational use. And it's when a prolific bodybuilder goes, like we had Sean Roden go, Mr. Olympia, not so long ago, and now with Cedric Macmillan going as well, it all of a sudden sort of people go a bit, that's a bit more scary now because it's a named bodybuilder. Now, we've been losing about one a fortnight for the last 24 months. And that's an unprecedented amount of deaths from the community. I mean, if you look at wrestling, boxing, sort of combat sports, or should I just say sports that are actually, let me be a bit fairer, um, pursuits that are very hard on the body. Do you know what I mean? Rather than me just saying, oh, it's combative sports or it's strength sports. But if we look at world strongman, Olympic lifting, powerlifting, strongman events, bodybuilding, cycling as well has to go in there, doesn't it? Of course. The incident of heart attack, myocardial infarctions is alarmingly high. The greatest category at the moment for deaths in young men is, of course, in soccer. Good old fashioned, what we call here in the UK, soccer, footy. And I've had enough people contact me and say, oh, we're over 500 now, what's going on? I'm not qualified to comment, I don't know. And of course, the minute you dare mention the vaccine, you will immediately, as Russell Brand is finding out, get called a conspiracy theorist. Because the default accusation is to be called a spoiler alertist, but really a conspiracy theorist. Um, the problem with the conspiracy theorist term now is that what was not allowed 6 or 10 or 12 months ago on any of these platforms, whether it be YouTube here or Instagram or Twitch on that one, you would be banned and removed. I mean, I got 2 YouTube bans and 3 Instagrams, and I gave up on Facebook entirely for just quoting George Orwell. The fact checkers came in, but then if you go and say something like, "Oh, young men are dying, young athletes are dying," and it's a high incidence of myocardial infarction, that's the immediate default, sort of loudspeaker assault you'll receive, from the religious zealotry we're now seeing in on the left, should I say, is you'll be called a conspiracy theorist. And our own boy, Russell Brand, and I say our own boy because Russell Brand is from a part of the UK, Essex, and I lived there for, well, 15 years in total, but 7 years, then 8 years. Anyway, the point being, Russell Brand is, feels very local to us lot here, and he's recently grown like another splurge. And of course, the UK press and the American press have been coming hard for Russell Brand because Russell Brand, obviously, he's pretty much a household name. Most people have heard of Russell Brand, and the minute Russell Brand started to give his opinion on anything COVID related or vaccine related or drug related or young people dying, heart attacks, etc., strength athletes, bodybuilding, anything like that, you're slammed a conspiracy theorist. And the presumption is these people deserved it because they were either didn't take the vaccine or they were an abuser of steroids. And again, there's no understanding of the term. I obviously took steroids. Well, I say obviously, I competing at the level I competed at, of course, it involved chemical assistance. I didn't have any intention of competing as a natural athlete. I was not interested in doing natural shows. I wanted to be, at that high level. It is sad what we're seeing now because Cedric Macmillan was, by all accounts, a really healthy bloke. He was, I'd never met Cedric, but Cedric, he won the Arnold Classic. I mean, that's no joke, winning the Arnold Classic. And there's some lovely footage of Cedric Macmillan when he got Arnold himself to do some classic Arnold poses on stage. So really, I mean, although it was only announced yesterday, there seems to be 2 schools of thought. The popular opinion at the moment with Dave Palumbo having spoken to Cedric's wife apparently is he was battling chronic pneumonia. I've had pneumonia 3 times between 2014 and 2018. Um, very unpleasant. Um, Hospitalised all 3 times, but you know, to be functioning with pneumonia, I'm not saying it's not serious, but what I am saying is, as an outpatient, to have pneumonia and to be getting around more than 3 steps, it's not full on pneumonia because, when I had pneumonia, um, I couldn't walk like three steps. You know, um, I was physically incapacitated. I couldn't breathe. I had to be hospitalised because I couldn't, get out of a car and move. I couldn't function. So yeah, I don't know. Obviously, acute means quick onset and chronic is prolonged. And I don't know, it's a funny one. So look, we'll know more in the next day or two, but there has been an alarming number of people under 50 from the bodybuilding community die in the last 2 years. And the general consensus is, a bit like these football players that have been dying, is it vaccine related? Of course, the vaccine is in its infancy, so we don't have that data. And anyone that says, "Oh, I'm an authority on, messenger ribonucleic acid, and we know all there is to know about this new style of vaccines, which obviously aren't inoculation. The traditional understanding of vaccine. And I'm not an immunologist, I'm not an endocrinologist, I'm not an ist of anything. Obviously, I've spent a lot of time with nephrologists, obviously due to kidney, dialysis and transplant. So I do know my nephrology, but it's really sad to see what's going on. And of course, like I say, if you say publicly, and you're like a Russell Brand, you're a big platformer like that. If you say something like, this is vaccine related, you'll be just removed, straight away. So we'll find out what the real cause is. At the end of the day, people stop moving, their hearts stop beating. The 2 heart attacks I had were unpleasant. Like I say, I had a couple of stents put in. But with Cedric Macmillan going, it seems to be a bit of an alarming one for the community because, as bodybuilders go, as well-known big name professional IFBB bodybuilders go, Cedric was a well-known, well-liked, and a when you look at bodybuilders, even if you're just Gen Pop and you're not involved in bodybuilding, and you just look at bodybuilding, that sort of mainstream purview, and you're not involved in the game, you can still see bodybuilders that look healthy and others that just look like they're caning it. Do you know what I mean? That there's 2 distinct looks in bodybuilding. That you can look really, really good, have a really decent physique, and you manage to pull off an air of I'm good on I'm clean on. Obviously, not many are, but what I mean by that is, we need to see more people getting to see their phlebotomist, getting their blood work done more often, and getting an echocardiogram. Just get your ECG and just get your bloods done. Get your bloods done. Please get your bloods done. Do check your creatinine. Do check your blood pressure. And do check your blood sugars. Please, please, please. So it's. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. It remains to be seen. I think the bit that makes people go, oh, blimey, causation, correlation, causation, is the fact that that they seem to be vaccinated people. That's like I say, look, I'm not vaccinated. And at that point, I feel I now have to say, but I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I never took the vaccine because I was told not to. Not by 1, not by 2, not by 3, not by 4, but all 5 of my doctors. So it wasn't like I had I didn't even have a dog in that fight. It wasn't like I'm going to start going down rabbit holes and researching it. But like I say, with the passing of Cedric, and the minute the minute I heard about Cedric, I was like, oh, and it was I got a lovely friend called Dougie, who is, who runs the gym that I used to work at in London. And, you know, I'm only on the periphery now in bodybuilding. Do you know what I mean? I'm just, I'm not in it anymore like I used to be for all those years. A great 27 year. I can't be anything but grateful for having, 1990 through till 2017. That was my gig. So I've been out for 5 years now, and obviously retired competitively in '07, very suddenly, sadly. But I still, from a geek's point of view, oh hello, my lovely. From a geek's point of view, I still find myself, just, well, not turning pages these days, but scrolling. And I still speak to a small handful of people that are involved in the game. Like I said, my friend Doug that's still involved in it. And a couple of other people, like Dorian and stuff. I still speak to these people frequently, who are involved in the game. So I felt really sad when I saw Cedric had died. You know, I know the whole causation thing, and it is default position. The public's position is steroids, 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 and then the other side is vaccine, vaccine, vaccine. No one stops to think that this could have just been a congenital heart problem. This could have just been, people, you know, people die all the time. But sadly, externally, if people have lots of tissue on their skeleton, immediately, the uninformed public opinion and how the public likes to opine on this, steroids, 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 and like, I saw a conversation yesterday and it made me laugh because it's this very popular trans in sport conversation. You can imagine certainly where I stand on the trans women. If you're AMAB as opposed to an AFAB, if you're a assigned male at birth, a natally born biological male, and you've gone through puberty and you've lived for 2 decades, Leah Thomas, or formerly known as William Thomas, and you're placing 500th against your fellow peers man, and then you decide, because you identify as a woe man, but you can't call it adult human female because the left won't call a woman what it is, even if you are Ketanji Brown, the High Court judge. Yeah, right. And I'm not wearing a blue hat and a blue top. I rest my case. So yeah, whether you're assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth, a natally born biological male or female, you only see one-way traffic. And what do I mean by this? I mean trans women. In other words, cock and balls men, okay, who identify as females, hence the term trans woman, as opposed to a trans man who is a AFAB, natally born biological female, who identifies as male, who decides to thrash blokes. Why does that never happen? Again, I rest my case. You never see a woman who identifies as a man dominate in men's sports, do you? Ever. Nor shall you ever. Personally, the reason I'm pissed off with trans women, men who think they're girls, is because I see this as completely misogynistic. I think they're borderline misanthropes, actually. They often have quite a nihilistic, misanthropic worldview. They've come to hate themselves and perhaps hate people at large, but specifically, I think it's a hatred of women. And as a person who adores women, what troubles me about this greatly, I'm sort of getting off topic, but in the subject, or whatever, off subject into on topic, off subject, whatever. But it's in the same ballpark, right? It's in the same atmosphere of conversation. If you really want to see trans women compete in sport, give them a trans category. Then let men compete against other men who think they're a woman. You know, it's Stephen Crowder did a good job. Stephen Crowder did a great job with Changed My Mind the other night. The other day, he did a three-part series, and again, if all you're bringing to the argument is insults and throwing rocks and throwing milkshakes and calling and saying it's fascistic, you know, and saying, you know, if you don't have a logical verbal debate and all you can bring to it is, like I say, you know, um, personal attacks, and you can't invoke science or biology because you know, I don't like selective biology. I just like biology and science across the board, and that applies to the vaccine too in the whole COVID section, the COVID conspiracy. I don't like selective biology and selective science when it suits them. You know, very, very simple. And we're not making things simple. Things that are simple and should remain simple aren't. This is why we're seeing people like Joe Rogan do better than ever, and so he should, because, you know, common sense is no longer common. You know, that's patently clear, isn't it? Common sense is no longer common. And I think there's instinctively, intrinsically, people have a desire for common sense, and common sense really is now going to be called, you know, centrism or centralism, just you know, having a grasp of reality. Societally, we fall down, and I've always had this conversation where people, again, with the tiny audience I've got, people might say to me, "What's the one argument, Justin? What's the one conversation where you would put everything you've got into it?" And I'd say, "Well, it's this one. It's this one. When you start becoming anti-biology, you know, XX versus XY chromosome, and you're denying, you know, the biology. Oh, 15.4.1 is available. Good old iOS." So whether we're talking bodybuilding and the very sad loss of another well-known bodybuilder, or you know, trans thing, you know, all this stuff. And sorry, that's what I was going to say. What I wanted to say, dudes, to show the level of ignorance in the trans community, the argument about people having hormones, and again, this just shows the lack of knowledge in the mainstream gen pop public and in the media, which I call the malevolent media, or the smeardia, the corporate legacy mainstream smeardia. Truly Machiavellian, truly evil, really are, is the use of the word hormone. And what tickles me as a past steroid user, I mean, now the only steroid I take is obviously a corticosteroid called prednisolone, which is a prescription corticosteroid, obviously, as a person living with a kidney transplant, you know. So, you know, along with the 16 medications I take each day, my anti-rejection immunosuppressant drugs, you have to have prednisolone, only 5 milligram, one tablet. It's very harsh. The side effects, you know, with my osteoporosis and type 2 diabetes now, it's part and parcel of having, you know, something balanced, plate spin your transplant. Is a corticosteroid, and of course, you know, my days of taking an anabolic growth-giving androgen, because all the hormones that I used to take, they're either you know, they're a low, mild androgen, or they're highly androgenic. That's it. I've never understood why people like to. I don't mean this in the literal sense. I mean it in the metaphorical sense. When you're selling the conversation of or justifying steroid use, people talk about an anabolic column and an androgenic column, and I'm like, no, these are anabolic steroids, title, and it's a low androgen or it's a high androgen. There's nothing more to digest than that, you know. And obviously, you know, you can go through all the sort of, you know, trade names and generic names, but when you're looking at the trans community, when you're looking at women who take hormones, testosterone, what do you think it would be? What do you, you know, this is why it's, I'm taking the piss, because what would it be if it's not testosterone. When you hear Joe Rogan, as popular as he is, talk about HRT and TRT and hormone, what would these hormones be if they're not anabolic androgens? If they're not, whether it's enanthate or propionate or CYP or SUST or whatever, it's just going to be testosterone, just like I took when I was bodybuilding. I'm sorry, I just think it's quite funny. So again, and I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and the guy arguing actually said, no, they don't take steroids. That's it. It was Crowder. Sorry, it was Crowder. And I like Stephen Crowder because he does the Change My Mind on the college campus, right? And the guy arguing him, just typical, LARPing lefty log, said, oh, these people take hormones, not steroids. And Stephen Crowder, who's knowledgeable enough, said, well, what do you think these are then? And he said, well, they're hormones. Well, yes, but they're steroids. It's testosterone. It's a steroid. It's an anabolic androgen. Anyway, so that's my little chuckle on that. Yeah. So when you hear about people taking hormones, it's a steroid. Specifically a growth-giving cellular growth, anabolic anabolism, as opposed to catabolic catabolism or cannibalization of tissues. It's muscle hypertrophy, not atrophy. It's very simple to understand. Anyway, so back to Cedric Macmillan. All I'm going to say is we'll find out in the next day or so what it was. Obviously, ultimately when everyone dies, it's their heart that stops. Things stop working, don't they? And that sounds very, very super layman, but it is sad. Yes, it sounds conspiratorial to mention the vaccine. Yes, it does. But there does seem to be, again, is it causation? Is it correlation? Causation is alarming, isn't it? Correlation is less so, but we shall see. We shall see. That'll do tonight. Like I say, I'm not doing long live streams these days. I'm just trying to literally keep myself sort of, this was episode 474, just a little waffle from me, little sort of semi-rant, incoherent, poor eye contact, all the usual points from me. Thank you for checking in on YouTube, Insta. That'll do. I'll come back and do another one on Friday. I'm going to stick to Monday, Wednesday, Friday because just because I don't know. I'm just think Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Why not? All right, I'm going to say goodnight to YouTube first over here. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you soon on Friday. Cheers. Stop.